Welcome to Red Stars Report, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the latest news and commentary on all things at the highest level of women's soccer in Chicago. If you're here for the Red Stars, welcome. If you're here for Stars FC, welcome. We'll get the name change in eventually whenever the club decides to do that. I am your host, LT.
And I am your host, Liz. Co-host, Liz, excuse me, sorry.
Yep. Hey, no. You're also a host. Just you're the host as well as I am.
I'm
Uh,
here. Again, I don't know who I am. The Red Stars don't know who they are. We're just all
There you
here.
go. Identity crisis all around. Um, so we asked our community to send us questions last week about almost anything, not just Red Stars related, but just, soccer related, other questions. Very fun. Loved that episode. It was fun to answer your questions. We're going to continue that today after a couple of different pieces of news that we have. I guess we can start with Jameese Joseph, who has been called in to the U.S. Women's National Team for their Futures Camp. Last week we talked about players who we thought could eventually end up on the national team, and Jameese did not come up. But she has been on I think it was the U14 before. She was called into the U20s a couple years ago. And this is an opportunity for players who are under 23 to play or to train alongside the senior team at this January camp. And Jameese is the only Red Star to make it into that call up. What are your thoughts, Liz, on Jameese getting this opportunity?
Surprised, but awesome. Love it. I was hoping to see at least one player from Chicago make it. Obviously, we talked, as you said last episode, about who Jameese didn't make it into the list, but I apologize. I was unaware. Just kind of like when she got drafted, was unaware. Should have done a little bit of research on that. Apologize. But she was one of the sparks for the team last season. So Emma seems to probably she sees something there. And I'm excited. The camp just overall, I love what Emma Hayes is talking about with it because she wants to align the youth teams with the senior level team and she wants more interaction between the under 23 team and the senior team. So this will be a great experience for all the players and Jameese. Like she's going to get to be there with everybody that got called in at the senior team, plus all of the 23 under 23 players. So I'm excited for her. What a great opportunity. And I'm glad that they moved it out of California because
Yeah.
of the wildfires, and they're now going to be in Florida. So she'll have some good weather hopefully there, and she'll get a great experience and an opportunity to get a little noticed. I think by some of the she piqued Emma's interest enough to get a call up. So I
Yeah.
bet it was that goal that she scored on Anna Morehouse. I just feel like it was that. I have to bring that up every time.
I love that goal. Yeah, it was definitely the kind of thing that you don't necessarily see a rookie do. And she did it. And like you said before, and we've mentioned a million times, Jameese was sort of just like this surprise player to us when she got drafted. Didn't know much about her. Looked at some of her college highlights and she seemed pretty good, but I didn't know what the like what her ceiling was or even what her floor was, honestly. And she came in, she fought for minutes, she got them, and off the bench she was spectacular for Chicago. Had put in a lot of energy this season, scored two regular season goals and that playoff goal. And then she had two assists as well. She absolutely dominated that San Diego Wave performance, which really sort of put eyes on her from others in the NWSL. When she first came into the club, she spoke about her hopes to sort of learn under Mal and how much she like during preseason watched Mal and sort of is inspired by Mal's movement on the ball and everything that she sort of does in the sport and you can sort of see her find her own style throughout the season while like emulating some things that Mal does as well and kind of having her jump into this futures camp for the national team while the you know the focus of the national team's forward line is her teammate. I think it's just a brilliant opportunity. Even though Mal's not in this camp, I still think any future recognition that Jameese could get from this will be helped by the tutelage of Mal Swanson.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think Jameese is a great mix between Mal and Ludmila, and learning from those two is just going to benefit her immensely because Ludmila's got that little bit of flair in her game, and that Jameese definitely has that flair, and Mal's so quick. And it's I am so excited for her to get to learn under both of them and play with them. And she's obviously, as I said, caught the eye, and that's kind of the name of the game when it comes to the U.S. Women's National Team. You got to get your foot in the door, and especially when it comes to this type of thing. And this camp seems like a really solid opportunity to really get looked at, because you are going to be right there with the senior team. You are going to get to play and impress and make a name for yourself. And so I'm excited for her. What a fantastic opportunity. And for everybody that got called in, it's a very solid futures group when you look at it, just
Yeah.
just the futures group, not even the group got called in for the senior national team. And I'm so excited. It was very, to talk about the senior team for 1 second, it was very odd not seeing Alyssa's name there.
So
That
weird.
was so weird. But
Haven't seen that
yeah,
since her injury back
yeah.
in 2021. It's
Yeah, it
weird.
was just it was so weird. But I'm like, okay, this is what she wants. And obviously Mao's not in there either, because of rest and injury recovery and things like that. But yeah, I just had to mention Alyssa not being on there was just a very odd feeling for a moment.
And will never be again. Uh,
Yep.
not to put tears in anyone's eyes.
Wah wah.
um, yeah, the when they initially started talking about this futures camp, you and I had discussions about like the confusion on like who was actually going to get called in to these because like we didn't know if the U23 designation meant like players who are a part of the U23 squad already, or if it just meant any players that are under the age of 23. So when the roster had come out, I initially my first thought after seeing the Jamees news was where the hell is Hannah Anderson? But she's 23, and after looking at the rest of the roster, is a bunch of 22-year-olds and downward. It made much more sense that she would not be a part of the futures camp. So I guess we're just gonna have to wait for her to get called into the senior team one day.
Hopefully, or maybe they'll change the rule or whatever the futures camp is, or do an expanded January camp or whatever. But yeah, I think there was just a lot of confusion across the board with that. I mentioned it numerous times in the Discord because the way things were reported on, it sounded like it was just a futures camp or like an expanded national team camp that could be players 23 and under. NWS, it was like NWSL, comma, under 23. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And then they came out with the initial roster, which was the senior team, and I was like, okay. And then they're like, oh, we're gonna do the futures one the next day, and I was like, oh, there's two. Okay. Again, words
Yeah.
in the reporting was very confusing, but I'm excited. I think it's a great opportunity. And I'm so excited for Jameese. She deserves it. She's put in a lot of work, and to go from somebody that on draft night that nobody seemed to have any information on to now getting called in to this futures camp in a year's time. Awesome.
Yeah, fantastic early trajectory in her career. So I'm looking forward for her to keep climbing, and then obviously to take whatever she can pick up from all the other forwards, both on the futures camp and the senior team. What she can learn from them in this camp, and then bring it into preseason with the Red Stars. The other news, speaking of the preseason, is that the NWSL had released their league calendar for the 2025 season. Some important dates on that calendar are that the trade window has now been abolished. So come January 15th, any player can be traded between NWSL clubs at any point in the season. So no more trade deadlines, no more of that. The transfer window still exists, so overseas players and everything like that'll still have certain dates where those things can happen, but players in between clubs can be traded at will. So that's interesting. The preseason starts January 15th as well. At its earliest for teams, it's been reported that Chicago will start the preseason January 27th. 40 player preseason roster deadline is due on February 5th, which is the latest date that preseason can start for teams. The first roster cut down to 32 players is February 19th, and then the final cut down to the 26 players is on March 12th, and then the regular season starts on March 14th. So there's your sort of preseason calendar. We'll obviously throughout this time all the way up until the regular season, we'll keep everyone informed on signings, roster updates. We'll send those out on social and the Discord, and we'll talk about them here as well. I think preseason wise, I think everything's pretty standard, other than obviously the trade window getting abolished. I think in the league calendar itself, through the regular season, I think the most interesting aspect of it is that there's no matches in July due to international tournaments. Clubs are allowed to set up their own exhibition matches, but there's no regular season matches. I think that's just so strange.
It's going to be odd. I feel like we're never going to get away from it. I feel like there's always going to be a month because something's going on in the soccer world that we're going to run into that. It happens. I The trade thing is going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking going on leading up to the start of the season. I think that we're just kind of getting into it, and we're going to see a lot of movement across the league in the next couple weeks. It feels like the season just ended and we're already like jumping
That's
into it.
soccer
I
for
love
you.
it. I love it. I'm all for it. It feels like there's not really an off season. And
Yeah,
so I'm excited. I know that there's been a lot of comments about the reported news that we're not starting preseason until January 27th. Not super concerned about it personally. I think that they're doing what they can do. Again, it could be a variety of reasons why they're doing that. The season doesn't start until March, so there's plenty of time. So
yeah.
they'll get their work in. They'll get their work in. They'll get it figured out and go from there. But it just means that we're one step closer to another season.
Yeah, there's we've seen a lot of players coming back to Chicago recently. My Tani Lopez is getting settled in Chicago recently. It's always fun when players from countries who aren't used to the bitter cold of Chicago. She spent time in New York, so she's not too unfamiliar with this weather, but it can be interesting. But her Instagram posts have been fun. But with players coming back, I'm sure there's going to be some voluntary training workouts and stuff that they'll all do together before the preseason. So people will get their work in. There's players that are out of the country. There's players that are in Hawaii right now. It's like they're continuing their off season. They'll get their work in, and then like you said, the regular season doesn't start until March 15th or 14th or whatever. So plenty of time. I kind of understand a little bit about like wanting to start earlier, but I'm sure it's scheduling issues or what facilities are available. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that sort of goes into that. It's not just like we'll just start whenever we want. I'm sure clubs always want to start as conveniently as possible. And just on like the signing front and everything, there are signings coming. Obviously, the roster sits at 22. It's been reported that by Gal Pal Sports that Sarah Griffith is either close to signing or already has re-signed with the Red Stars. So that'll make 23. And then so three more spots to the maximum, and then preseason rosters can go up to 40. So you have plenty of players that are going to be coming in for preseason. When it comes to just full contract players, um, there's rumblings about college signings that are happening. So look forward to those, and the roster will fill out. It's not like just because other teams are making signings does not mean that Chicago's going to sit on 22 players and then that's just going to be it. Like it's going to happen. It happens every single year. You just got to be patient. The rosters will come out, the signings will come out. It's going to happen, and whether or not you're happy with the signings, then we can talk about that.
And I will let my feelings be known.
As will I.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating. I get it because I there were a few players that have now signed as college players with other teams that I really wanted Chicago to give a look. No idea. Obviously, we don't know what is happening behind the scenes
Yeah,
of things, and so it's hard to say. Well, did we even try? I don't know. But hopefully we are, and hopefully there's things that will be announced soon. Or by the time this episode comes out, maybe some things have already been announced. Who knows? But it's just one of those things that I trust them because they've made some really smart decisions last off season, and I have faith that they're going to do the same. Like the move that they made for Sam Staub, Jameese Joseph, who we just talked about, getting her in the draft. Obviously, the draft is no longer a thing, but
yeah.
they're good at evaluating talent. So I am hoping that we are going to sign some fantastic individuals and it's going to be great. And we've got room. At least we're not sitting like San Diego where it's just mass exodus right now. And I don't even know if they are at the league minimum with their player number.
Yeah, I haven't
Um,
looked.
it's bad, but we'll see. That's the thing. Like the rosters will fill out. We're going to call in a bunch of people, give them a
Yeah.
shot, and who knows? You could find somebody in those trainings. It's going to be an interesting time. I'm excited to see now that we've had ownership for now an entire off season. It'll be good to see. I'm excited, and it just means that we're getting again one step closer to seeing everybody on the field again. I want everybody to get healthy too. That's the other thing. Like, yeah, we want to start preseason, but there's like Mal's not going to camp because of rest and injury. Like, yeah, it'd be nice to get started, but it sounds like she's not fully ready. And also on like a personal level, a lot of these players only have a couple months to get all of their things happening. Like there's a lot of weddings happening and events that people plan during this time. I know that there's an upcoming US Women's National Team wedding. Sophia Smith's getting married soon. So I know that there's going to be like events that are happening. So that all can be coming into play to when players are coming in and out of preseason. So it's tough the life that they live. They only get a short couple months to do all of the things that we all get a year to kind of plan. So it's tricky.
It is. I like what you were talking about before, I think sort of ties into our first question from our community. We'll sort of slide into that portion of the episode now. Two combined questions. So I'll say them both, but it's kind of one topic. Um, how do you rate the new ownership group now that they have had a year under their belts? And how do you rate the on-field decisions and business side moves? I'll start with just ownership and the business side in general. Um, I think this ownership group, specifically Laura Ricketts and who she's brought in, has really tried their best to, fulfill what they promised when they came in, even after just a year. I always go back to that Wrigley match and sort of walking through that uh, concourse outside the park and everything, and they really did a great job of making it feel like it was a Red Stars stadium and it was a Red Stars home match. And I think that was sort of, I don't know how much that meant to other people, but it meant a lot to me because even though SeatGeek is like Red Stars stadium, they share it with so many other people that it always just sort of feels like a shared stadium. You go in, you see the rugby lines painted on the field. You'll you'll see the Fire play a match in the afternoon, and then the Red Stars play it in the evening, and it's like it just feels um, like obviously an ongoing issue. We talked about last week the stadium change um, and when that could happen. And I think the Wrigley match was really important to show that this ownership group can invest greatly into creating a an environment in which the Red Stars feel like at home and can feel like their own organization separate from other people, even though you were in a historical place like Wrigley Field. When it comes to their actual like well, I guess when you go like down the tier to like GM and stuff, I think like Babette and Rick have done a great job bringing in talent, especially talent that we've did not expect to get, like bringing in Sam Staub, Natalia Kuika. The last draft was great. Trading away Penelope Hawking for enough money to cover bringing in Ludmila, um, signing Julia Grosso. It's like they they know how to do it. You know, it comes down to how their moves are utilized on the field and how everything sort of comes together. But I don't think that this new regime has um, like they haven't made like a "what are you doing" kind of move yet. Um, and I think that's really important when it comes to player signings, when it comes to trades, drafts, whatever. I know everyone right now is sort of like feeling like they're sitting on their hands doing nothing, but like there's so much going on behind the scenes that you don't know about, and there's so much more yet to come, and I doubt that Babette or Rick or anybody in that front office are just fumbling the bag right now. They're going to do stuff, and then it just comes down to what Lauren and his staff can do with those players on the field. So I think overall they've done a great job so far. I think just more investment will come down the line with ownership to actually sort of change more things about the club and sort of get away from the stain of the club's recent history.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so easy to sit there and look at some of these other teams that have had established ownership for with the current owners for a longer period of time. Like it's so easy to be like, oh, Laura Ricketts has a lot of money, and why aren't we doing all of these things? Because you look over at Washington with like Michelle Kang and be like, oh, well, why aren't we doing all of those things? Well, first of all, Michelle's been there for a long while. Like she's established. She has a flow to things. We're a year. We're like a year-ish into this, a little over a year, but like we're just getting our feet wet with this. They're probably figuring out how to navigate everything. The league changes yearly on how things function.
Yeah.
So it's a constant learning curve. And this is their first full off season, as I said before. And I would love to get a big splat, like big splashy, flashy type of move this off season. I feel like we're going to. I hope that we're going to. Um, and I think that that might appease some of the people in in the community. But I have no problem. As I said, what they did finding Jameese and as you said with Sam Staub, like I can't fault like what they've done, and so I trust them. and I trust what they're doing. I just would love for some of these announcements to come soon because obviously preseason's coming and I'd love to know kind of what we're looking at when it comes to who's going to be there, who signed, and then who we're calling in as potential non-roster invitees into camp. But yeah, I'm excited and I agree. The Wrigley game was fantastic. The way that they did everything. I still like just thinking when you were talking, I was going back and thinking about those flags um over the scoreboard and how they changed the scoreboard, the manual scoreboard at Wrigley to all the NWSL games, and they changed the flags to the NWSL teams. That, as a Cubs fan, was the coolest thing. And I didn't notice it at first. And then I noticed it and I'm like, just all of the attention to detail that they took to do that sort of thing was amazing. And that tells me that they care. And that's all I've ever wanted with ownership. And it felt like with previous ownership that there wasn't that care. It was just, I want results and I don't really care about anything else. And I think that now with this ownership group, we have a group that cares about the players, that cares about the fans, that cares about doing everything the right way. And that is so important to me on top of also winning. So I like where we're headed.
Yeah, I think just looking at those um, things when it came to that match, like, and how that kind of care and detail can be translated into the future when a new stadium comes around, or when a training facility is built, or whatever. If those things are going to happen, the ownership group obviously consistently, especially the president of the club, Karen Lietzau, every single time she's speaking in public, mentions that their goal is to get out of SeatGeek. So it's, I think they're pushing hard. Obviously, in the world of women's sports, you're always going to be met with resistance from outside forces. So a lot of things are out of their control. Um, but I don't doubt their passion for wanting this club to grow and succeed. And then, like I said, when it comes to the front office, I really don't think they've had any major missteps so far when it's come to player signings or player trades or anything. Like, little ones, sure, but some of them can even come down to um, the on-field decisions or sideline decisions. And that was another part of the question, is rating the on-field decisions. And I would say that I think in like the first year, Lorne and his staff have done a decent job. I think um, I was thinking the other day about how the club was playing really well in the beginning of the season, and then Ella Masser went on maternity leave, and Ella has such a brilliant tactical mind, especially when it comes to defense. And I really do think the club sort of missed that a lot throughout the rest of the season. And she obviously came back for the end of the season, and we still didn't get the results that we wanted. But I think having her around from start to finish this season will be incredibly beneficial. Um, I've Lauren is such a great players coach. I think he does a great job with the players in the locker room, in training, and I've always really appreciated his coming and facing us in the media, and putting the decisions that were made on the field on himself, and knowing where his weaknesses are and where he needs to get better and where his staff needs to get better, and not just blaming it on players or refs or whatever. Um, I always really appreciate that. So the first year, I think making it to the playoffs, making it back to the playoffs after missing in the previous year, I think was really, really important. We really thought it was going to be a rebuild year, and then it turned out to be a playoff year. So if this club regresses, then I would start calling certain things into question and criticizing things with a lot more like detailed scrutiny. But last year was sort of just like a let's see what happens sort of year. And this year is kind of like a okay, with your back against the wall, you were able to produce a playoff team that had a lot of struggles anyway. Um, can you improve and be even better and not regress? And then I'll start making more decisions on how I feel about the decisions on the field.
Yeah, I think the on the field stuff it's hard. As you said, we made the playoffs. I don't think a lot of people expected us to make the playoffs, especially after Sam Staub went down hurt, which I don't think Chicago gets a lot of. I don't want to say credit, but I credit because all of the teams, I feel like Portland in particular, it was, oh, they have so many injuries, and you never really heard that about Chicago. Like we lost a star center back, and Mal was hurt, and Ali Schlegel was in and out with illness. And it was just one of those things where I feel like things happened, but we persevered. And that is kind of how I viewed last season. It was a let's see what we've got and then move forward. And it went well. I obviously we kind of stammered and stutter stepped into the playoffs here, but we
Yeah.
made it.
They
And
never dipped below the playoff line all
no,
season. Like that's crazy. And they didn't drop to eighth until the end. Like if there was
yeah,
no eighth playoff team, and you ended the ended the season 2 or 3 weeks early, then they would have made the playoffs any other year. So like there's not too much to like. Obviously, when you look at the finer details of the tactics, the player decisions, the personnel decisions, the subs, the whatever. Like, yes, there's things that are questionable, but when it comes to overall team play, I would just take that year and just say, can you get better? I would not say you've done a horrible job and these people need to go. Like that's not at all in my head.
well, and again, I like Lauren didn't have a full off season. I feel like
Yeah.
I've said that like 50 times already in this episode, but like now we get a full off season. He can also help pick players and get towards players that he wants and all of that, and like have time with everybody to create a system. I essentially what he did was kind of take what he did with Jamaica and kind of use that as a more defensive low block and kind of get breakaway goals, that sort of thing. I'm hoping that we can get away from that a little bit next year, and go from there. But again, he didn't have a full off season, and yes, it sounds like an excuse, but it's a legitimate excuse. Like it
Yeah.
takes time to implement changes and know what you have. And I don't think a lot of the time you knew what you even had. You had Mal coming back from a super serious injury. Nobody knew how she was going to play. Nobody.
Yeah.
You know, you have no idea. And then you learn the fact that she was also super sick and it was a deathly illness that she got after her surgery. Like nobody knew where she was. And then you have Sam Staub getting hurt, and then you have all of like these youngsters coming in and playing, and you have Ludmila and Julie Grosso coming in. You and all of these players are trying to play together. They did a great job of staying together as a team, and you can tell that, as you said, he is a player's coach and he kept them together. There was never any yelling at each other or blaming one another or any of that stuff. And you love to see it. And we've talked about Ali Schlegel a lot. And I think that her and Alyssa Nair as leaders on this team would never let that happen. And so I just applaud the team, and I'm excited to see in Lauren in the second year and ownership in the second year and see what they can do. Because after this year, depending on how things go, then I will start to have questions. But maybe things are going to be great, and we are going to be fantastic. I'm hoping so.
Hey, I'm all for it. Like there was just I felt like you said, like Lauren kind of came in and there was already sort of uh like an overshadowing of a system that was sort of already in place, players that were sort of already in place. And I think he spent the season really trying to figure out like who his people are and who he wants to utilize and how he wants to utilize them. And now he can have this full off season, get in a few new players, and then, off to the races. Like he knows who, well, he's always known who Mal is, but it's like he knows who Alyssa is. He knows who Jameese is now. He knows who Hannah is, who Sam is, who Taylor is. Like he knows the pieces that he has that have been here in years prior, or were drafted, or even were like signings, like Shea Groom or someone. He knows the pieces that he has now, and he can sort of him and the full staff, Ella included, can sort of build something together this season alongside those players themselves, and they can form their own connections. Because I feel like a lot of what they struggled with this season was consistency and connections with each other because of how many players were in and out, and lineups were changing because Lauren was trying to figure things out. So there was no consistency in the forward line. There's no consistency in the midfield, no consistency in the defense because of Sam going out of there and them trying to rotate in people to see what works. And so there was just a lot of like questions throughout the whole season of who this team is and what their identity is. And I think they can find that identity now, uh, moving forward, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. I think that there's a lot to do. Like everybody talks about how players come in from other leagues and they have to learn how to play in the NWSL. Lauren had to learn how to coach in the NWSL. That's a hard thing to learn too. Ownership had to learn how to be owners in the NWSL. Like again, they constantly are changing how things are done. Like they just did an off season and they're like, "Oh, just kidding. We're getting rid of the draft and now there's not a trade window anymore and here you go." So they learned one way, now they're having to roll with the punches, which now everybody's having to do. But I cut some slack to people because it's all new and now we can see what we have. He's had time to evaluate these players, and players that don't want to be here anymore are now leaving, and we're going to get some new people in. And I'm excited. I think that there's talent, and I think that if we can get a few pieces, we still have a shot to make the playoffs. And hopefully we can, because a lot of teams are getting better across the league. So we do need to make some
Yeah.
moves.
There are teams getting a lot better, but I think this roster has a lot of talent on it. So I'm totally cool with just improving and
Depth. I
where
want
that
some
goes.
depth.
Depth is important, especially on that back line. We have the depth on the forward line. Not just we need more depth behind that.
Yes. Yes.
um, moving away from the Red Stars with our next question. This isn't a community question. This is a Liz question. This is what I want to
Oh.
go into. I love this one.
Oh. Oh, I didn't prep for this one. I don't even know what my answer is. Okay.
I see. I when I was thinking about, I was like, I'll throw this in here because Liz asked it, and I'm curious who hers is. I was like, I wonder if she even thought this.
I didn't
Um,
assume we were going to do this one, but I got it. I have my answer. I'm good.
I put it at the top of the list.
I got it. We're good. I already have my answer. We're good.
Favorite NWSL player who isn't a former Red Star or current Red Star?
Which cuts out like 50% of the league.
Yes. And they have
Because,
to be active
yes,
players,
has
no
to be
retired
active,
players.
has to be Mine is it's Naomi Girma. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I love Naomi. I've got her US Women's National Team kit. I got it for the last World Cup. Love her. Um, we'll see what's going to happen there. There's rumors of flying. There's rumors of flying. We'll see. Might not
Jaden's
be in the
already gone.
NWSL. It might be elsewhere in the NWSL. We'll see. But yeah, that's my answer. But no, I thought this was a question that would be fun. And also, people in the community, I would love to know your answers to this question as well, because it's fun to see who people kind of watch outside of the Red Stars players.
Yeah, it was something that I kind of struggled with in my early viewing of the NWSL because I was so sort of focused on the Red Stars and just sort of trying to learn the league and trying to learn um, this side of the sport and how players play that I was like super heavily focused on the Red Stars that I didn't it came the only players that I knew outside of the Red Stars who were in the NWSL were US Women's National Team players. I didn't know like the players on the rosters who are either like internationals or players that don't see those call ups even though they're really good. So it wasn't until the last like 3 or 4 years that I really sort of started watching like every single NWSL match and sort of finding fandom in other players. My player that I selected is one because of her play, because I think she's fantastic, but also a sort of a personal connection to it is Carson Pickett. Um, I love the way that Carson Pickett plays. I loved her when she played for Orlando. That's when I first started watching her. And then her time in North Carolina, and then her time in Louisville, and she's everywhere.
Back to Orlando.
Back to Orlando, it's like, yeah. Um, so for people who don't know, Carson Pickett was born without one of her hands, and my brother was also born without one of his hands. And when I've throughout my whole life, I've always been incredibly inspired by him and other people who were born that way, or even people who were amputees. And when I saw Carson play for the first time, um, I just like immediately fell in love with her because of that connection that I had. And I started like I told my brother about her uh I don't know, there's just like there's something about Carson that really sort of like really hits home with me. Seeing the videos of her interacting with other kids who were born without their hand, just like it was just so touching to see those things. And her being a fantastic player also really helps because it like makes it even more inspiring how she can be that fantastic. And it's something that I've spent my life admiring about my brother. He played baseball. He played rugby. It's like it him doing those sports really I would look at and be so inspired by, especially baseball, because he was born without his left hand, so he would um, tuck his glove under his armpit, and like Jim Abbott, who used to play for the White Sox, and he would throw with his right hand and then tuck his right hand into his glove, and then pull it out, and then catch, tuck, pull the ball out, throw. It's like how like that's so it's so
It's
amazing.
impressive. It's
Um,
impressive.
and the funniest part about the Carson thing is when I first started watching her is she both obviously had no left hand, but also had a cast on her right hand. So it was just so fun to just because like in soccer, other than to throw the ball in, you don't necessarily need your hands unless you're tugging and grabbing at players or you're playing goalkeeper. And just the stuff about like her getting called for a handball and saying like to the ref, like, what do you mean handball? I don't have a hand.
The
Like,
point the pointing, that is one of the funniest things.
yeah. So amazing. So Carson's always had a soft spot in my heart. And just watching her play always brings joy to me. So Carson's always been my NWSL player outside of the Red Stars, and who's never been a Red Star, sadly, that I've always enjoyed watching.
I mean, we could use her. We could always use an outside back.
I think she's happy with her championship in Orlando.
Oh yeah, she's a good one. I just love what she uses her platform to talk about it, because it's one of those topics that a lot of people don't discuss, and obviously it's front and center with her in a sport that you don't have to use your hands, but you like obviously she doesn't do throw-ins and things like that. But it's just one of those things that I'm glad that she's used her platform in such a positive way. And there's that photo that you see circulate all the time with the her reaching out with the fan that also did not have their lower part of their arm.
Mhm.
And so it's just one of those things that was all over social media when that immediately happened. It didn't just stay in the NWSL world. That was sports wide, countrywide. I don't know if it went worldwide, but it was all over the place. And so I just love that she's been such an advocate for that. And yeah, she's a wonderful human. So I'm glad I asked that question so you could talk about her.
Yeah, there was also a player a few years ago in the NFL who also was born without a hand that I think he used to play safety for the Seattle Seahawks, and I was
Yes.
always incredibly inspired by him too. It's just it's such a hard thing for kids to sort of grow up with that, and to be able to see a professional athlete, whether it be in the Paralympics or right here in the NWSL, thriving athletically, thriving in their life, in their professional career, is always something that kids who are living through a similar life can look to and be inspired by, and even like people like myself. Like I said, I grew up inspired by my brother. I never understood the things that he could do um, with just one hand would just like blow my mind to the point where like I would forget um, that like because he was just doing the same stuff that we were doing. It was amazing. So yeah, I want the second you asked that question, I was like, I got to throw this in here because I got to talk about the person. I just have to.
Absolutely. I'm glad. I'm so glad that I said that because I
And
thought
I've
it was just a fun
and
one.
I've mentioned it before. I'm pretty sure my love for Carson Pickett because of her story and stuff. But I don't think I've ever talked about it in that depth before.
No, and I'm glad that you shared. I think it's an important message, and it's good. Then it's some sports are very adaptable and people are adaptable, and Carson's a great advocate for that sort of stuff.
Yeah. What do you want to move to next?
I don't know.
Do
I'm
you want to
looking at
just
the
go
list here.
right down to the other NWSL one and right
I
below the favorite NWSL player?
Yeah, I think this could be a fun one. I mean, this is all I feel like these questions got a lot of comments post last episode when we were talking about teams that we don't like and things like that. So this question is, who is Chicago's biggest rival? I love rivalries. I love them in all sports. I think they're fantastic. I want more in the NWSL. And I'm hoping that we can somehow get that. Hopefully the league gets big enough at some point where we get into some like conference type thing or something like that, where we're going to be playing certain teams more frequently. And then we can create more of those rivalries. I think some teams just like like Boston, like tried to create a rivalry before they even existed with
Oh,
Angel
they
City, which was really
they
weird.
listed like their three rivals or whatever. They're like Boston's three rivals are these teams.
It was
It's like
Gotham.
Gotham, Angel City, and someone else or something.
Yeah, it was
I was
so
like, what are you
weird.
doing? That is not how rivalries work.
No,
like
no.
Portland, Seattle, that rivalry was always like incredibly fun to watch, whether it was in Seattle or whether it was in Portland. Like that was always sort of like a must-watch television sort of thing during like when Megan Rapinoe was around and stuff. And that rivalry sort of continues to go on, and obviously the Angel City and San Diego rivalry was supposed to be this like both coming in at the same time, both California teams. That's just Southern California as well. Like that's just sort of what rivalries are built for is interstate or sometimes you'll even see like intercity rivalries like the Crosstown Classic in Chicago baseball. Um, Obviously, just sticking with Chicago, you always think um, like, Bears Packers, one of the greatest rivalries in all of sports.
Cubs
Back in the
Cardinals.
Cubs Cardinals, back in the day when they were in the same conference, Blackhawks, Red Wings,
That was fun. So fun.
even like Blackhawks Predators now is a great rivalry. There's just like there's so many rivalries that are so fantastic. Bulls Pistons before the divisions sort of became obsolete in NBA basketball. Uh, Chicago rivalries have always been incredibly entertaining, and I feel like Chicago as a whole, NWSL wise, doesn't have that like one true rival that is just a like everyone knows when they play that it's going to be a bloodbath. But to me, I feel like Louisville always kind of has our number, and it really pisses me off. Like if they're on like a losing streak, they'll come to Chicago and they'll win or draw, or it's just like they just bother me so much. Yeah, that like that. I wouldn't say that they're Chicago's biggest rival, but to me personally, it really annoys me how often a team like them, when they're not playing well, plays well against Chicago. It really annoys me.
I'm just laughing because that's my answer.
No, of course.
The same reasons. It's the same thing. Like I feel like the Challenge Cup specifically created that in my brain. The
Yeah.
teams that we played, it feels like whenever we play, it was Louisville, Kansas City, Houston.
Hmm.
It feels like whenever we played those three, it just feels like it's a little bit more than everybody else at this point because we played them in that Challenge Cup more than everybody else. And so,
Yeah.
but for some reason, it's Louisville. I don't know why. I
Like
kind of hope that
I
I
wanted
want to
it
be
to
Kansas
be,
City.
I wanted it to be Kansas City,
Yes.
but it doesn't feel like Kansas City at
Well,
all.
because they're really good and it's hard to play with them right now because they're really good.
Yeah, but even when they like first entered the league, there was nothing sort of between Chicago
There should
and Kansas
they need to
City.
make it though. They need to do something. I see. I feel like they could do some like I don't know that somebody's got to get something. I don't like the Kansas City San Diego thing where they're like the water battle or whatever. I think that one's stupid. Um,
I've
and
never even
then
heard that.
maybe is Kansas City's like social
I'm sure.
admin did like the water. What I don't remember what they called it, but it was the whole water thing. And
Gotcha.
I'm just like, nah, not there. There. I'm hoping that there's like Gotham get something going with Boston, though. I feel like that could
That's
definitely
obvious. New
be,
York, Boston's
yeah,
always a win-win
yeah.
when it comes to rivalries.
I, yeah, I just want to call the Portland and Seattle one a turf war because they both have turf, and so there's that. Um, but yeah, I'm hoping that we can get something with somebody though. I don't know. It could be Louisville. I'm fine with it.
I
It could be
I'm cool
Angel
with it
City for
being
all I
Louisville.
care.
It like two Midwestern teams going at it. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I'm cool with it. Hey, if they want to start a rivalry with like Colorado or something when they come in, I'm fine with that too. I kind of felt like there could have been something there with Gotham
The
uh
pizza battle.
like starting in 2021. But once again, like Gotham just got too good for
Yeah,
for Chicago to, and obviously like other sports have like hundreds of years of history to sort of, or I shouldn't say hundreds of years, just decades or 100+ years um, of games matches to sort of build these things over the years and playoff battles and interconference titles and whatever. Um, the NWSL has only been around for what, 11 years, 12 years now.
don't make me do math.
So when it comes to Chicago themselves, I just doesn't feel like they have enough history with anybody yet to say this is our definitive rival. But just to me, it just feels like Louisville's always sort of been either annoyingly good when they face Chicago, or it's been a close enough match and a comeback win or a comeback draw or something that sort of makes those matches a little more exciting to watch.
I agree. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I don't know if people from Louisville feel that way. I would be curious if they would feel the same way. I have no idea. I almost wondered at one point, since so many players went to San Diego, if there would be a little bit of a rivalry there. I also wondered when some players went to Kansas City, if that would kind of turn that up a little bit. It didn't really seem to do anything.
No,
But there's not really much across the league. It doesn't. I feel like social media is trying to create rivalries, but it doesn't, minus Portland, Seattle, which it was already built in because of MLS. It doesn't really feel like there is much yet, but I feel like it's building. I
yeah,
think that there's some teams that are getting some, there's
getting
some
used to each
heated,
other.
yeah, they're getting used to each other for sure. You have that Orlando KC thing this last season was very, very
Yeah,
interesting, where they got mad when they were celebrating and that whole thing. And so I'm curious to see how that continues. Again, a rivalry to me has to go on for multiple seasons for it to
yeah,
be a thing. So I can't speak on that, but I want one. I
yeah,
want a rivalry because I want to not just hate Portland. I want to really like have a team that Chicago is like, this is our rivalry. Maybe if St. Louis ever gets an expansion team, that could be an option for Chicago because
yeah.
of the
Or like
Cubs
a
Cardinals.
Cincinnati or something,
Yeah, something like that, or Minnesota. I could
something
see
really
maybe if
close.
they get that sort of thing. But because St. Louis has that new stadium now and an MLS
Right.
team, so that's why I'm like, if there's ever expansion in the Midwest and St. Louis gets one, you never know. It could happen. That could spur a rivalry because that is a close distance between the two cities.
Yeah, I like a rivalry. I'm all for it. It's just like I'd have to really, because like I've mentioned before, like I haven't followed this club since their inception. So I don't know too much of the history of the teams that they had played prior. Like I don't know their history with Kansas City before they defunct or became Utah or
They
whatever.
were really good. They were really good. They won a bunch of They won championships with Vlatko there.
I
So
remember them winning. I just don't remember their matches against Chicago and like what those sort of felt like. And I feel like the league was so early on in its inception that there was no um, time to sort of even think about rivalries. It was more of like a, is this thing going to even last?
well, I also
So,
feel like this is probably slightly controversial, and I might get some comments on this, but
oh boy,
um, women's sports in general, typically, I feel like in the past have tried to stay away from heated rivalries and things like that because
which is annoying.
yes, yeah, that's yes. So you're on the same page as me with
Yeah,
this. So they've tried to stay away from it because they don't want that sort of thing. They think it's bad image. Women aren't supposed to be like that and blah 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 blah. They're allowed to be emotional. I love that it's happening in sports. I feel like in the college level, in
in the
sports across the
WNBA,
board.
it's really, really evident. I love it.
I mean, I have only watched the WNBA for one season, and I can tell you that based on my experience watching it, there are rivalries. If they have not existed, they are going to exist here soon. I feel like the
Yeah.
Fever and the Sky are creating a little bit of one as we're going along here. So it's kind of fun, and that was kind of just built in, but it's fun. Like you love that sort of thing. It makes the game mean more, and so and it gets fans invested, and you can get fans that aren't like you people that are just fans of the city and their sports teams. It gets them involved because if they learn that there's a rivalry, then they get into it and they're like, oh, I don't like that team because they have a rival with this. And so I
Yeah.
want it more. And I'm hoping that we can get past that whole women don't need to have rivalries, that sort of thing in sports. And hopefully the NWSL has now existed for long enough that we can now get to the point where it's okay, and it's okay to be have emotions and get mad and say you hate this team and blah blah blah, and have emotions and say things and do
It,
things. I love
it,
it.
it's one of the best parts of rivalries is the little trash talk in the press conferences before matches and stuff. And you don't see that too often. Like we mentioned before, like you'll see that with like Portland and Seattle. Like they'll always do little chirps at each other prior to their face off. But you don't really see it with anybody with Chicago. It's just like, yeah, this is the team we're playing, and we're gonna try to beat them. There's no like, oh, we remember them and we're gonna get them. Um, I hope that like Orlando and Washington, they're gonna meet up for this Challenge Cup match at the beginning of the season, whatever that thing is. And then I hope they like meet again in the playoffs, and like that would be fun to sort of see something develop there. That sort of East Coast sort of rivalry would be exciting, I think, because they also both teams are just stacked with talent and very physical and tough players, and I'm excited to sort of see what kind of develops there. But when it comes to Chicago, I have no idea. Like I said, personally, it's just Louisville just sort of grinds my gears currently. So
Yeah, it's pretty
I'll
much
wait for that
those.
matchup and see
Yeah,
what
it's pretty
happens.
much the Challenge Cup teams for me. I don't know, like it's Kansas City, Houston, Louisville, but mostly Louisville because I feel like Kansas City's really good right now, and then Houston was not very good this last year, but they've gotten a lot better. So it could happen, but I don't know. I think Louisville just kind of being up close to us is also helpful.
Yeah,
So we'll see. They're also kind of a hot mess as a club sometimes, and we're kind of a hot mess at times. We're better now, so that also takes part in it, I think, a little bit. But yeah, I want more rivalries, and I think with more teams getting added in, I think we're going to see more of it. And now that it's become more socially acceptable, as I was talking about with women's sports, to have rivalries, I'm ready. Like, let's go.
me too.
I want it. I want all of that.
Yeah, I love a good rivalry, and I'd love to cover a good rivalry. That would be very exciting in Chicago to sort of lead up to matches with clubs that we see as rivals. I think that would be very fun. But thank you for everyone for submitting your questions. We have plenty more to talk about throughout this off season. So I'm excited to keep talking about those things. I'm excited about the news that will come out here soon with signings and especially like college players that will be signing. I think those will be fun to see for the community, and everything else that sort of comes with this offseason leading into the preseason, which, as we said before, is reportedly January 27th is when preseason will start for the club. It's exciting to get sort of back into the swing of things. I didn't know what this offseason was going to be like for Liz and I didn't know how much content we were going to find or be able to talk about, but it's already almost over. And it's like, wait a minute, what happened
It's
here?
15-ish, 2 weeks-ish days, something like
Yeah,
that.
we'll already have actual like roster stuff and everything to talk about. Yeah, it went by so quickly. It's this and it's soccer and it's Formula One that always goes by so quickly for me in the sports that I watch. Everything else is like a long drag. of an off season. But like I said, thank you for submitting your questions. We have that thread still open on our Discord. You're more than welcome to keep asking questions in there, and we'll answer them throughout the rest of this off season and even into the regular season. But if you join that Discord, it's an amazing community. I will never say enough about that community. It's just that they're wonderful, and it's one of the most important parts about Red Stars Report. But make sure that you're subscribed to our channel across all platforms. And YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, please leave a like. It helps YouTube say, like, here, watch this stuff because you like soccer and you like the Red Stars. Follow us on social media at Red Stars Report to keep up with the latest news between our episodes, especially those roster updates if they come out while we're between records. Don't forget to join our Discord, as I mentioned. And, next week we'll hopefully have a bunch of more news to talk about. So we'll see you next week for another Red Stars Report.